Even skeptics can't explain the shocking ending. Will you guys be able to find out the secret? Find out now on Bionic Pig Television. What if that... We should start doing that. That should be my intros now. No, it's not stupid. My wife said it's stupid. Chat, do you think she's being honest? Couldn't possibly be, right?
About a little boy in India who for a time seemed like he
Listen to Amy.
was the worst behaved kid on the planet. But the truth was, that
It's
little
not
boy
stupid,
had
it's
a
special.
huge secret. And when his secret got out, it changed
Meh, it's fine. That's all I get. That's all I get. That's, wow.
everything anyone thought they knew about
It's
this
genius,
boy.
thank you.
And
Someone gets
it
it.
prompted all these big-time college professors
Someone gets
from
it.
major universities all around the world to personally fly to India to investigate this kid's claims, because the implications of what he was saying were massive. But before we get into that story, if you're a fan of the strange, dark, and mysterious delivered in story format, then you've come to the right place, because that's all we do, and we upload once a week. So, if that's of interest
Wife
to you,
is completely
please
right.
replace the like
Dude, you
button.
guys don't let me have any fun, all right? That was a good intro. That was a good-ass intro, all right? And no one appreciates it. YouTube comments, help me out here. Okay, drop a goddamn comment right now and tell me how good that intro was. All right? This is your chance. This is your chance. I might start liking YouTube comments better than Twitch chat. This is your chance, YouTube comments. Redeem yourselves. Tell them the truth.
Roll-on deodorant ball with a single clove of garlic. Also, please subscribe to our channel and turn on all notifications so you don't miss any of our weekly uploads. Okay, let's get into today's story.
What the hell are you talking about?
Late one afternoon in December of 1986, a woman named Shanti Singh was sitting on her bed cradling her toddler
Shani
son, whose
Singh?
name was T2, as he threw a huge temper tantrum. T2, who was 3 years old, had already been throwing this tantrum for about 30 minutes at this point, and it didn't seem like anything Shanti did was getting him to calm down. In fact, honestly, it just seemed like T2 was getting worse and worse by the second. And
I should be studying, but I love you. Studying is temporary. This stream is forever.
Shanti knew her son's
Think
constant
about it.
wailing must be annoying her neighbors in the little rural village
Yeah, technical Steam Deck problems.
in northern India where they lived. But again, Shanti just felt like really there was nothing she could do. After all, this was not a typical toddler tantrum. T2 was not throwing this tantrum because he lost a toy or was fighting with his siblings or something. No, the reality was Shanti and her husband had no idea why T2 was throwing this tantrum, because T2 threw these tantrums all the time for seemingly no reason, and nothing they did would get him
Classic
to stop. He
child.
would just start throwing these crazy fits, and he would only stop when he was ready. Now, Shanti and her husband had taken T2 to the local doctor, and he'd been examined, and the doctor said, "Look, I think your son's just fine. I can't find anything wrong with him."
Is he autistic? Even skeptics can't explain this shocking ending. The one person in chat. Is he autistic? You cracked the case. You cracked the case. Skeptics, geniuses, doctors all couldn't figure it out. You got it. You cracked the case. Figured it out. It was autism all along. It worked? Okay, awesome.
with him.
You got it.
Whatever's causing him to be so upset, it's got to be psychological.
The tism.
Shanti grabbed her son and tried to give him a hug and kiss to get him to calm down, but as she did that,
Chat is
T2
smarter than
turned around
everyone.
and tried to hit her in the face and kicked her and punched her, and so Shanti had to kind of fall back on the bed, and T2 at this point, who's still throwing this huge tantrum, he leapt off the bed and ran out of the room. Now, Shanti had already sent the rest of her family, her kids, her husband, outside to wait out this current T2 tantrum, and so for a second, Shanti thought about just laying on the bed and letting her crazy toddler just kind of run around the house until he was done throwing this tantrum. But as Shanti was laying there on the bed, practically crying from frustration, she heard a plate break in the kitchen. And so she jumped up and ran into the kitchen, and there was T2 looking down at the ground where there was a shattered plate on the ground. Clearly, T2 had smashed it on purpose. And so as furious as Shanti was, she suddenly realized that, nothing she could do was going to get this kid to stop. And so right now, the only thing she could do was just put him in a safe place where he couldn't hurt other people or himself or damage anything else. And so Shanti, trying to be as calm as possible, walked up to T2, who's still throwing this tantrum and swinging at her as she's coming near him. And she grabbed him, she turned him around.
I promise you, it's not autism. Why are we still on that? If it is a issue that scientists and doctors couldn't explain, I promise you, it's not autism. Thank you, Fajita Vegeta, for the Prime sub. Thank you, Lady Rage, for the Prime sub for the 4 months. No, it's autism. I'm banning everyone in chat. I'm just gonna ban everyone.
Couldn't kick her or punch her. She put him into his room and then shut the door, and then she sat.
I'm also autistic, so I get it. Oh my! I can't even tell. Are you guys just baiting me right now? Are you baiting me? I genuinely can't tell if you guys are just that stupid or you're baiting me. Oh man, I'm
down in the hallway with her back
God.
up against the door to keep it shut.
Oh.
And then as T2 inside the room began banging on the door and trying to open it, Shanti's sitting there anchoring the door, and she's just praying that her son's gonna calm down soon. And then at some point, Shanti heard her son start to say something that typically signaled the end.
I wasn't talking specifically to you, Rat Goff. I was talking to other people who were saying it, all right?
Metro boom and make it boom.
Thank you so much, Mr. Pup.
T2 in the bedroom began saying the word Shurshverma, which actually was a nonsense word that Shanti and her husband and the other kids had no idea what it meant. But, T2, at the end of his tantrums, he would always just start saying over and over again, Shurshverma, Shurshverma, Shurshverma. And so Shanti, she's in the hall and she's hearing T2 start to do that. And so on the one hand, she's thinking, okay, this tantrum's about to end. But on the other, she's like, I have no idea what that word means. It's obviously connected in some way to what's going on with my son, but I have no idea what it means. It sounds like nonsense. And so Shanti began yelling through the door at
Ballin
T2
is quiet
to explain what Shurshverma meant, but T2 had no explanation. He just kept saying the word over and over again. Shurshverma, Shurshverma, Shurshverma.
That's like me with Tatanka. Tatanka, Tatanka, Tatanka. Tatanka, Tatanka, Tatanka.
Shanti and her husband had 5 other kids. T2 was the youngest, and T2 was not like any of his other siblings. The other siblings did not throw temper tantrums like this, not at all. And in fact, T2 had been a difficult child even before he was born. Towards the end of Shanti's pregnancy with T2, she'd become very, very sick, and in fact had to be hospitalized for the entire last trimester. And then as a newborn baby, T2 basically didn't sleep at all, and he cried constantly.
Fun
and
fact,
so Shanti and her
everyone
husband
has
initially
kicked
thought,
a pregnant
T2
woman in their lifetime. It's also really hard to smell mothballs because their tiny legs are so difficult to get apart.
must just be a very fussy baby. But in time, as he grew into more of a toddler, it was clear to Shanti and her husband that T2 was actually a different kind of kid. He seemed like a very
autism,
unhappy and kind of angry kid who was permanently on the verge of crying or throwing a fit. But it wasn't until T2
There's no other
began
explanation.
talking at around 2 years old that Shanti and her husband really started to become worried. Because the things T2 was saying as a 2-year-old were just not in keeping with what you would expect a 2-year-old to say.
I've watched this one play another. Yeah, you know what? You know what? Let's just stop the video because one person in chat already saw it. Let's just stop. Let's just watch something else. I'm gonna stop. I'm done. I'm done reading chat. I'm done.
Say. And I'm not talking about the nonsense word that T2 would use during his temper tantrums.
Tatanka.
Basically,
Tatanka.
T2 would say things that seemed to indicate that he genuinely hated everyone in his family. Now, for context, Shanti and her family
Have they thought
were not
about
poor,
asking him
but they
what's
weren't rich
wrong?
either. They lived in a little concrete home. They didn't have a TV or a car, and all the kids wore...
Well, you know what? I don't think anyone's ever thought of that. Maybe we should just ask him what's wrong. Shit. I didn't think about that.
Hand-me-down clothes, and Shanti actually handmade her clothes and her husband's clothes. But the family always had enough food to eat, and they were educated, and they seemed happy enough. It's just that they didn't really have the ability to do anything extra, like above and beyond a modest life. And T2 had never known anything different. This was his life from the day he was born. But when he learned to speak at around 2 years old, it was like all T2 wanted to talk about was how crappy of a lifestyle their family lived. For example, when T2's mom, Shanti, would put on one of her saris that happened to be ripped, a sari is a traditional garment in India, T2 would look at what she was wearing, and in toddler speak, he would tell her that she looked terrible and that it looked like she was just wearing rags. T2 would also walk around the house and he would point to spots in the house that looked dirty, and he would demand that somebody cleaned it up because he didn't want to live in a dirty house. And then whenever the family needed to go somewhere and they would
Is it still autism, chat?
walk there or take the bus there, T2 would complain the entire time that he wanted to be in a car, and why aren't we driving in a car? Like, why are we walking? Despite the fact that T2 basically had never used a car before. But perhaps the strangest aspect of T2's behavior was around the time he began talking and insulting his family, he also began talking about this very historic city called Agra, which was located about 8 miles away from where they lived. Agra was famous for being home to the Taj Mahal, which is considered to be one of the most beautiful buildings ever made. Agra also has a very busy downtown and lots of tourism, but T2 had never been to Agra, and there was no reason he would be drawn to Agra, like his family had no connection to that city. But starting around the time T2 began talking at 2 years old, he began asking to go to Agra several times a week. And when his parents would say, no, we're not going to go to Agra, T2 would throw a huge tantrum. And so not long after T2...
Is this going to be one of those, I had a past life where I was a rich dude who lived in that area? So autism.
Speaking and saying all these terrible things, Shanti and her husband decided that really all they could do was just wait and hope their son grew out of this terrible behavior. But T2 did not grow out of this. Shortly after his parents decided to just kind of wait it out, T2 would randomly attack another small child with a sugarcane.
Autism is just past life regression.
Bleeding at the end of the attack. And then also another time, shortly after the sugarcane beating, T2 was at the store with his mother, and his mom was looking at this bracelet, which she couldn't afford. She was just looking at it through the glass. And T2 sensed his mom wanted the bracelet, and in an odd show of affection for his mother, he turned to the shopkeeper, this little tiny kid who's not even 3 years old yet, and he tells the shopkeeper that if he doesn't give this bracelet to his mother for free, that T2 will shoot and kill the shopkeeper. And so after this, Shanti and her husband just stopped taking T2 out in public at all.
Autism? I mean... What? I like how Baldwin starts it with like, oh, a nice gesture. He was doing a nice gesture. He's like, hey, by the way, if you don't give my mom this for free, I'm going to kill everyone in this store. Yeah, it's a very nice gesture.
It was just too embarrassing. But what really just unsettled Shanti the most about her son's behavior was that nonsense word that T2 kept saying at the end of all of his tantrums. Shirsh Verma, Shirsh Verma. And so fast forward to that day after he's broken the plate and now Shanti's put him in his room, T2 began saying that nonsense word, except he was getting a little bit older and his speech was getting a little bit more clear. And so as Shanti was laying up against the door, she realized that her son was not saying a single word, Shirsh Verma, he was saying 2 words. They were Suresh Varma. But Shanti had no idea what that meant. She thought it sounded like a name, but it was a name she had never heard before.
Tatanka?
But one day, a few months after the dish-breaking incident, in April of 1987, all of T2's very strange,
autism with
erratic,
the dash of
terrible
fire
behaviors would erupt all at once. That April day started out like any other. Shanti made breakfast for her family, and then her husband headed out to do some errands, and her 6 children kind of dispersed around the inside and outside of the house to play, study, whatever. But T2 was really grouchy, and so he stayed inside in the kitchen with Shanti. A little while later, Shanti's oldest son came into the kitchen, and he asked his mother, hey, when will Dad get back from his trip to Agra? Shanti's husband had gone to Agra to run one of his chores, and Agra was the city that T2 was totally obsessed with. And so when Shanti's oldest son said the word Agra, T2, who was sitting in the kitchen, he heard it and kind of looked up like he was totally fixated on their conversation. And then as Shanti and her oldest were talking about the dad, T2 just got up, left the kitchen, and he went to his room. He grabbed a couple of things, and then he came back into the kitchen carrying this bundle of clothes with him. And he walked right past his brother and his mother. He went out the front door and began running down the road without saying a word. Remember, this is like a 3-year-old child. This is not a teenager. This is a little kid. And so Shanti and her oldest son, they kind of watched in shock as T2 ran off down the road. And for a minute, neither of them did anything.
The one on a stick?
And then it was like they broke out of their trance, and the oldest son just turned and began running out of the house to catch up with T2. Now, it didn't take long for the oldest to catch up with his young brother, but it was surprisingly hard to stop T2 from trying to run away. He fought back as hard as he could to keep his brother from pulling him back to the house. And then when the older brother got T2 back inside, Shanti looked at her older son and she saw he had a black eye from where T2 had just hit him. And when Shanti turned to T2 to try to get him to apologize to his brother for hitting him
in the face?
She saw T2 was completely inconsolable. He was throwing a huge temper tantrum. He was on the ground kicking and flailing and screaming at the top of his lungs. And so Shanti and her oldest son knew there was no hope in getting him to calm down. He was deep into one of his tantrums.
Autism
and so
strain,
Shanti and the oldest just basically restrained T2 so he couldn't hurt himself or one of them or damage anything. And for a while, as they held him to the ground, T2 just continued to scream and flail and throw this fit. But eventually he did kind of calm down and he began saying Suresh Verma over and over again. But then he began talking about something that he really hadn't brought up before that stood out to Shanti and her oldest son. T2, in addition to saying periodically Suresh Verma, also began talking about some radio store in Agra. And T2 kept saying, why didn't Dad bring me to the radio store? Why didn't he bring me? And so as Shanti is listening to her son, she suddenly thinks, you know what? This is my chance. He's being so specific about this radio store. You know, maybe this is my opportunity to lean in and learn what the heck is going on with my kid. And so once T2 fully stopped his temper tantrum and Shanti and her oldest could finally let go of him, once T2 had left the room, Shanti turned to her oldest son and she told him to go to Agra right now. Just go there and look for a radio store or something. Look for anything that could be a clue to what's going on with T2. He obviously has some fixation with the city. Just go, look around, see if you can find something. So the old
Where the f*** are your parents? Who are your parents? I'm gonna call Child Protective Services. It's time to stop.
I think we need to call Parent Protective Services. It seems like this 3-year-old's an absolute giga chad who could beat up his older brother, no problem.
The oldest son left the house and he went to one of his friends' houses who had a car, and together they drove into Agra. Now, Shanti had no idea if her oldest son's trip to Agra would produce anything useful, but she figured, you know, she's got nothing to lose. A few hours later, when Shanti's oldest son returned from Agra, he came into their home with a very serious look on his face. And right away, Shanti could tell, clearly, he's discovered something.
There's a radio store in there called Sheshmarnya.
He asked her oldest son, you know, tell me, what did you learn? What happened in Agra? And the oldest son, you know, he looked down for a second, and then he looked back at his mom and he just said, tomorrow, we're going to have visitors.
What? Visitors?
Are you a fan of the strange?
No, I'm not! I never watch your videos. It's one of his podcasts again, by the way.
The next day, a car pulled up in front of Shanti's home, and 6 people climbed out.
Not a real photo,
there was a woman
visitors.
wearing a beautiful red sari who appeared to be in her 30s, and then there were 3 other men who also appeared to be in their 30s, and they were all wearing suits and jackets. And there was also an older couple, a man and a woman, and the man was wearing this beautiful sweater, and the woman had on all this silk. It was clear, just from the way they looked, that these 6 people were not from this area.
You're a podcast? Don't call me that.
And they had a ton of money. Now, Shanti was inside the house, and she was watching this group arrive, but she did not go outside to greet them. She, her husband, and all of her kids, minus T2, had decided the night before, when they knew these visitors were going to arrive, that they wouldn't go out and talk to them. Instead, they would just allow T2 to basically make first contact with these people and see what happens. So when Shanti saw this group of 6 very well-off people were standing right outside of their gate, kind of waiting to...
Very normal. Let your 3-year-old son, you know, meet with strangers. This is
He
very
let in.
normal.
She called for T2 and said, hey, go outside and open the gate for our guests. And so T2, who was not throwing a fit at this point, he came running through the house and he went to the door. He's not looked outside yet. He opens up the door and he runs
Mom just
outside
doesn't want to deal
and he
with him
sees
anymore, yeah.
these 6 people on the other side of the gate. And suddenly Shanti heard T2 make a sound that he never made. It was like the sound of pure joy. He was so elated to see these 6 people. Shanti couldn't believe it. For a second, Shanti closed her eyes and almost started crying because she knew, even before T2 had made that joyous sound when he saw these people, they were about to solve the mystery of what was going on with her son. Just then, Shanti heard T2 from outside yelling for Shanti and the rest of his family to come outside and meet his other family. Shanti went to the door and gestured for the guests to come inside, and then she led them through the house to the back deck, and then after they were all seated, Shanti looked over at her son, T2, and she saw he had this huge grin on his face. He was so happy, and he was staring intently at the woman who got out of the car, who was in her 30s and wearing the beautiful red sari, and she was...
All right. Kind of weird. Kind of weird. The 3-year-old having a thing for the 30-year-old, kind of weird, man. I don't know.
Sitting right across the table from T2, and T2 is just locked on her.
Chat,
Now, at
still
this
autism?
Point, nobody is speaking.
Is it
Everybody
still
is just
autism?
sitting there. No introductions have been made, so nobody even knows each other's names. And in this kind of tense and awkward silence, T2, who again is just staring at this woman in red, he eventually breaks the silence, the 3-year-old child, and he asks the woman in red to come sit next to him. So the woman in the red sari, she does what he asks and moves over and sits next to the toddler. And then T2 looked up at her and he smiled and he said, do you know who I am? And the woman, she's looking down at him and she said, no, I don't. And T2 would look back up at her and he would say, I know who you are. You're Uma. And at this, the woman in red, whose name really was Uma, she gasped. She had no idea how this kid knew who she was. But before she could even say anything, T2 continued. And he said to her, hey, do you remember when we went to the fair with Ranu and Sanu and I bought you those sweets? And at this, the woman in the red sari, Uma, she had this new look come over her face. Instead of looking like she was just kind of shocked and appalled that this random kid knew who she was, now it was like a look of shocked recognition.
I
as
really
she's
don't like where
looking
this is
down at
going.
T2,
Yeah, I don't
like
know.
She suddenly understood what was actually going on. And at the same time, T2
Grown man inside of a
his
3-year-old?
mother, Shanti, was watching this happen, and she was kind of piecing together what was really going on here, and suddenly she realized she needed to check something. And she got up, and she ran out of the room, and she came back with scissors. And without saying anything, Shanti went straight to T2, she pushed his head to the side, exposing his right ear, and she used those scissors and began cutting all the hair off his head that was kind of drooped over his right ear.
Huh?
Kind of exposing the right side of his skull. And as the hair on T2's head fell to the ground, exposing more and more of the right side of his head, all the adults watching just gasped. And the whole time, T2 was just smiling. To understand what just happened out on the front porch between these random people and
Oh, shit. Let me cut up your kid real quick.
Shanti and her family, you need some context. So here's what happened when Shanti's oldest son was sent to Agra to go investigate and look for clues that could explain what was going on with T2. The brother and his friend had driven all around Agra, looking for radio stores and looking for things that might in some way kind of connect to T2, and they didn't see anything. But at some point, they drove past one of the many radio stores in Agra, and the name of this radio store immediately stood out to the brother and this friend. So the older brother and the friend, they parked their car and they went into
Source,
this
trust
particular
me,
radio
bro.
shop, and inside
Please
of there
just
is
get to the point. We've been at the point for a goddamn hour. What do you mean, get to the point? If you don't get the point by now, I think you might have autism. I don't know.
where they met Uma, the woman who had the red sari on, who was in her 30s.
It's autism.
that T2
Yeah,
said
that's
we
the
went to
point.
fair
It's
together
autism.
with that woman. So she's inside this radio shop.
TikTok
and when
brain,
the older brother
iPad kid.
asked Uma how this radio shop got its name, that was when things began to fall into place for this older brother.
Get on
about
with
what
it.
was going
Yeah, come on, Ballin. I don't want to watch a goddamn 26-minute video. Why couldn't you shorten this down to a 30-second video? Like, come on. Just say, hey, there's this one kid, right? He was walking around. He's being weird as shit. All of a sudden, he's like, hey, look, I was actually this guy in a past life. I reincarnated as a 3-year-old. Now I'm attracted to this 30-year-old lady. Post that to TikTok. That'd have been so much better, Paul. Come on, man. What is this garbage? With like the lead up to stuff, you know, you're trying to piece it together in your own head while you're watching the video. You know, screw that. Just give it to me, man. Like, Jesus Christ, this is too much. Having to wait and listen. God damn.
Going on with T2. Uma would tell the older brother that this radio shop actually belonged to her husband, except 3.5 years ago, he was murdered. He was shot and killed, and so she had been running the shop ever since. And Uma said she had considered changing the name of the shop, you know, since taking it over, but she just couldn't bring herself to change it because the shop's name was actually based on her husband's name. The name of the shop was Suresh Radio Shop. Her husband's name was Suresh Verma, the 2 words that T2 would say all the time at the end of his tantrums. Suresh Verma, Suresh Verma. That was Uma's husband. And it would turn out the details.
There are way too many ads. Oh no, if only there was some way that you could just get rid of them. Oh, if only I had control over the amount of ads, which I don't. I wish there's some way.
Details of Suresh's death matched up in a very bizarre way with T2's birth. And all of T2's totally erratic, strange, terrible behavior throughout really his entire life to this point now suddenly made sense if you knew about Suresh's life. Many people, including professors from major universities in India and America, have come to believe that what happened with T2 was when Suresh was murdered, his spirit somehow came out of his body and entered T2's body. Basically, Suresh was reincarnated in T2. This reincarnation theory would explain why T2 was always saying Suresh Verma.
I don't know, guys. I still think autism, right? You think that's better? Autism?
Because in theory, that was his
He's hyper-fixated on that guy specifically. Explained, debunked. You know that, like, he's never met any of these people or has ever even been close to the town. And he's 3 years old. And he can't read.
real name. You know, that's the guy who died, who then his spirit transitioned to T2. So he's saying his name over and over again. And then also T2's obsession with Agra would make sense because that's where Suresh's radio shop was and where he lived. Also, the reincarnation theory would explain why T2 was so critical of Shanti and the rest of his family's lifestyle, basically accusing them of being poor and kind of living below his station.
That Suresh guy's kind of a dick.
He was very, very wealthy, and so that was the lifestyle Suresh had lived. And so if his
What a
spirit
dick.
was now in T2's body, he might be at odds with their lifestyle. And lastly, the reincarnation theory would explain the two very unique and very pronounced birthmarks that T2 had right next to his right ear.
Thank you, Loki's
He had one right
curse.
above his right ear and right below it. Now, these were birthmarks that Shanti was well aware of, but after she learned about how Suresh Verma was killed, he was shot in the side of his head, and the bullet went in above his right ear and then came out on the bottom part of his right ear, right here, when she
How do you even get shot like that? Was the gun like pointed down, like above your head? Yeah, was he shot from above? Interesting. Bullet ricochets from above? What? I don't know.
She heard that, she ran and got the scissors, she cut the hair away around T2's ear, revealing the two birthmarks, and then the other families saw those birthmarks and they're like, oh my goodness, that is literally where the entry and exit wounds were on Suresh. And then also it's worth pointing out that on the day Suresh was shot and killed, well basically that day was when T2's mother, Shanti, began feeling really sick during her pregnancy with T2 and she had to be hospitalized. After this discovery about T2 and Suresh Verma, Shanti and her husband and the rest of her family expected T2 to want to live with Uma and his other family. And at first, that is what T2 wanted to do, but pretty quickly he actually decided that, you know what, I want to stay put with the family I was born into, and we can just visit with the other family. And so that's what they did. You know, Uma and the other wealthy family, they made visits all the time to see T2 and vice versa. You know, the families got along great. And as for T2, you know, he was really happy. You know, his bad behavior basically went away and he became a normal, high-functioning kid. And T2 has grown up and become a very happy and successful adult. He's got a family of his own, and he's currently a professor at a college in India.
Yeah, the reason I haven't said anything is I got nothing. Autism, like, I don't know, like, I got nothing, you know? Plot twist, the boy killed the man resembling his birthmarks. Yeah, and then he acted like the dude in order to cover his tracks.
In the very early morning hours,
Yeah, that was wild. That was a crazy story. Proof of reincarnation. Their source, trust me, bro.
Now it's time to walk away. I hope you enjoyed your stay. Did you laugh or cry or maybe subscribed? I'll thank you either way. You know I will miss you. I hope you return. Tell your friend or your mother to get me more views, please.